Let's return to our top story now. As you know, this is Diepsloot, and a senior government delegation is there following days of protests and violence. Police Minister Bheki Cele, Home Affairs Minister Motsoaledi and Gauteng Premier Makhura are in the area. Residents of the informal settlement just north of Johannesburg are angry about crime in the area. More than 50 people have been arrested. Let's talk to criminologist Guy Lamb about what he thinks in terms of what's happening in Diepsloot. Thank you very much, Mr. Lamb, for your time here on all angles. I think what's more interesting for me this morning in terms of what the new developments is that police are going around stopping random people and asking them for their identification. That cannot be legal.
Well, I mean, there's kind of questions whether that's legal or not, but ultimately that's not what the police should be doing. Obviously, they need to have valid grounds to ask for that kind of documentation, and doing it randomly is quite problematic. I think on this particular issue, I think it's trying to placate some of the concerns within that community around foreign nationals and the kind of presence of foreign nationals and foreign national residents in that particular area. But certainly the police doing that, and it's, this is not first time they do it. They do it in many areas, and of course it is quite problematic.
And, looking at the fact that the South Africans in Diepsloot who are protesting against undocumented foreign nationals, they seem to believe, really, that, giving foreign nationals documents will stop our rate of crime in the country.
Well, I mean, that's quite a complex question. What's driving crime? Who's behind crime? I mean, the vast majority of crime that's perpetrated in South Africans is by South Africans against other South Africans. We have had incidences where some foreign nationals have perpetrated crime against South Africans and other foreign nationals. I mean, this is an issue that happens throughout the world. It doesn't matter what your nationality is. But in terms of giving foreign nationals documentation, I think that can reduce the risk of those who may want to go to perpetrate crime, who kind of feel desperate in a situation where they can't, generate a livelihood, make an income, and have to resort to some form of criminal activity to do that. But giving them documentation may integrate them into the community more effectively, may give them access to resources and services, which would be quite important as well.
Now, just talk to me about, the minister himself. I wonder what your thoughts are about him going there. I mean, this would be the second time, but we know that the criminal activity in Diepsloot, it's not the first time that they're protesting. It's not the first time that the minister arrives to make promises. And, I don't know if the police should really, or rather the public should really believe that anything would change this time.
Well, it's certainly this is a case we've seen before. I mean, if we want to look at a similar case a few years ago in Gauteng, Indonesia, where there was a very serious problem with gangsterism and violent crime and vigilante responses from the community, who was sort of up in arms about the heightened levels of crime. I mean, the role of the minister going in, I think he creates a lot of work for himself by doing this, because every time there's one of these sort of incidents, there's an expectation he's going to go. So I think the role he goes in, it can contribute to stabilizing the situation, and sort of a demonstration that national government is taking this issue seriously and sort of making commitments. And then we saw in the past, and we're seeing now, the typical response is to deploy more police, and often more militarized police. So we've seen the tactical response team going in as a kind of a sort of militarized, really sort of demonstrating the muscle of the state that wants to do something about it. Because I think in these situations, it's important to stabilize them. And then obviously deal with what is the main drivers of this sort of crime, violence, and try and deal with the xenophobic sentiments that exist there. But it is quite important to stabilize. So having the minister and having senior government officials, including the premier, going into Diepsloot, I think is one way of sort of showing to the residents that government wants to take their concerns seriously. But of course, promises are made then, and then it is a bit challenging for the police to often meet those, because they have a kind of a limited budget. They've allocated resources in other areas. So we tend to see things being shifted around. So there's often that sort of short-term responses to it. But then in the medium to long term, often things go back to normal.
In terms of what the police are doing now, going door to door, for instance, I know that this is what the community members had asked for the police to do. But for them to stop people, at some point my colleague Buleli Tweety Jones was saying that they're stopping people, and if you don't have identification, they test you by asking you, what you call a certain part of your body in a South African language. Doesn't that then mean that the police themselves are turning into the criminals?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, what we're seeing is contributing to xenophobic attitudes. In a way, it's kind of perpetuating this discrimination that's happening. And I think what they're doing, and certainly this is, what typically happens in these kind of tense high crime situations, is the police do these high density operations. They go in and force, saturate areas, make their presence felt. I think in these kind of cases, I'm just speculating why they're doing this, but they do this in central Johannesburg, they do this in other major metros in a way to sort of demonstrate that government is trying to take the issue of undocumented migrants seriously and sort of demonstrating to members of the public that they're doing this. But of course, it does violate rights in many respects. It kind of creates a kind of a culture of fear, which we obviously don't want. But I mean, that's probably the reasoning behind this, but it doesn't excuse it.
All right. Well, thank you very much for speaking to us. That is criminologist Guy Lamb speaking to us there about what's happening currently in Diepsloot.